the idea that there is a history here. I mean, computing is not new. I mean, you go back to ENIAC in 1945. Well, computers were object of war. So was the internet. Then war, nuclear war. But to just see what has happened over time and where the missteps were and where the good steps were, that's a history. If you go back to the 70s, you have to see that here in 2018, things are not exactly as new as you think they're.
Ellen Ullman was a programmer in the early days of the so-called digital revolution. Her latest book, Life and Code, A Personal History of Technology, was named one of the best books of 2017 by the New York Times Book Review, GQ, Slate, and many other publications. This time on 20 Minutes into the Future, Maggie Duval and John Lebkowski have a wide-ranging discussion with Ellen covering the past and present state of the tech world.
There's something about how you got into coding that is intriguing to me. It's almost like a liberal arts approach to coding, which I don't see a lot of these days anymore because it's just specifically computer science, or if you're going into web development, full stack web development, and there's the humanities seem to be put aside somewhere. So I wondered if that would lay a little ground for you to start. I'd love to hear your thoughts about that to start.
Maggie, I was lucky. It was the time, because there were not enough programmers for an exploding profession. Computer scientists at that point, computer science was a sub-branch of electrical engineering. Electrical engineers were not going to go work for all these companies crying for people to work in business to business or mini computer development or, my God, mainframes, general ledger. So there was this need. And so this whole bunch of curious people walked in. I worked with people who were Sufi dancers, and let's see, this French guy who just refused to stop smoking and wear anything appropriate because he said, computers never told me that I look nice. I can't describe how they came from art history, music, a philosophy, ABD in classical literature. So it was a very rich mix of people who came in as the profession was exploding and who was going to fill these places. Now that changed in the 80s. I felt that by the mid 80s, late 80s especially, there was now computer science education and a whole new crop of people came into the profession, or at least that I worked with, who had a background in computer science, and they were engineers. I love engineering. I have to say, tinkering and getting things to work is so much what attracted me to the profession. You've got this machine and you make it work. Yeah, that's great. I mean, so engineering is a tinkering profession. It seems straightforward and hard, but it's not. You have to requires a person who has determination, who can tolerate failing over and over. Failure is built into the system. Backus, who invented, let's see, I think it was a basic language. No, we move on from there. He talked about, I haven't this background right in front of me. In an obituary, they quoted him as saying, you have to try something and it doesn't work. And you have to try something else and it doesn't work. And you keep trying and failing over and over until you find something that does work. And that pretty well sums up programming. So I love the engineering side of it, but I also like the enrichment of other people who are asking questions. Well, who is this for? Who are your models for this piece of software or this system? What kind of people are you attracting to work with you, to ask different questions? And just to enrich people's minds, to go out together and talk about something and just stimulate your thinking. So when you get back to work, those things you had to put in the background while you were talking about other things suddenly become very rich. They pop out. Banging, banging, banging against something that's not working doesn't work. It's called recreation for a reason.
Yes.
And that's why I'm very sad about what's happened in the profession. Now, people are always working.
Mm-hmm.
It's considered sort of a sin to just, I'm going offline for a while. I mean, even when people travel, they've got these selfies going and keep in touch with their friends and share everything. And I think, well, wasn't travel the idea to go away, have new experiences and meet new people, get lost and have these wonderful times? You said, oh, there was a fabulous restaurant we ran into while we got lost in Venice. And those are the great experiences. And so the getting away part, the recreation, has really fallen away. And that is what disturbs me really most about what's going on. People
that's
programmed in bubble,
Yeah, self-referential bubble. And I'm really intrigued by that. You talk about luck. I was very lucky when I eventually fell into the tech world. I worked for a small startup in Berkeley called Exemplar Logic. And what I loved about working at this small little startup is that there was a lot of interface between, there's only 10 of us to start, but between the engineers and the operations and the marketing and so on. But we had a very wise former activist at Berkeley in the 60s who knew that if we were going into overdrive trying to meet a deadline and we're all just banging our heads against the keyboards, and he would mandate we'd close the office down and we'd head over to Stinson Beach and drink beer and talk philosophy, and it was incredible. And it just seemed to loosen up things and reignited vigor and I in Austin, I don't see much of that anymore either. So I do appreciate that.
Well, unfortunately, what goes on is that people go out to dinner together. I see all these places. Everyone is always with their colleagues. Mm-hmm. Everyone is always with their coworkers. And even if you try to change the subject, you're just still in this closed world.
Yes.
People just ought to go home. People ought to go out to dinner with their friends who do all kinds of other things and don't understand one whit about coding. And that's what I mean by really getting refreshed. Your boss was brilliant to make everyone back off. Deadlines are hilarious. I mean, one of the only things that I can brag about is that I worked at Sybase when it was a startup. And my boss went to a meeting and he said, well, I think Ellen Ullman is the only engineer in the company who's meeting her deadlines. But that's not because I knew how to make deadlines. You have these coworkers. Well, how long will that take? 2 weeks. Well, it takes like a few days to roll out what you're thinking about, and roll in something else, code it and debug it. There really, unless it's the tiniest thing. Well, of course, one little tweak can bring down a whole system, as I've learned in my sad experience. Nothing takes. You have to really think about what it means to get away from one thing and concentrate on another. So I made good deadlines, I mean, they weren't slack, but they were enough for me that if I rushed a bit, I could make them. So that's another part of it. I mean, I don't know if you've seen a New York Times story today about all these startups. Their investors, well, especially like Chinese sovereign funds, are throwing money at them, $100 million, when they're not even ready for it. And so it creates this tremendous pressure for them to race and succeed. And that creates unrealistic expectations.
Absolutely. It's, I don't know. And there's just this very, this frenetic energy now. Yeah, just I'm thinking of the, where there was more interface being for me in the Bay Area in the late 80s to mid 90s. There just seemed to be a lot more of a ferment between and convergence between artists and coders and new thought type people. And it just, you'd end up with, it just seemed to feed everything, fed everything else. And I just wanted, because you're such an incredible storyteller, if you'd share a story or two with us about, let's say, how it was in 1990.
I got hired as a consultant at Sun Microsystems with in their research department. And it was a small group of very senior engineers who were working on testing software. In other words, formal methods that you could test whether software was working or not. And so I came to them in this interview and they said to me, your job will be to translate between the extraordinarily bright, meaning themselves, and the ordinarily bright, meaning all the other programmers who would use their tools. This was really funny. And the opinions they had of themselves were so high. And so I said, okay, how do I explain this? So I come in, I look at this stuff. First of all, they've named everything wrong. Something that, automatically checks, they called it a self-checking function. It's like, well, wait a minute. Self means like it tests itself, right? So, they had just used, how am I going to tell somebody that self-checking means it will be automatically checking something else? So, okay, we've changed the name. This is the kind of thing. And then, okay, I sketched out all the files that we'd be involved in it, all the steps, and a couple of the guys got really angry at me. And one of them, to his great credit, said, she didn't make up these files, we did. So I'm just showing you, if I were to describe this to somebody else, this is what it looks like. And they all groaned. So it is the sort of experience where, also as a woman, there was one guy who came over later and he was horrible to deal with. What is she doing here? And she made mistakes. And I kind of took off after that, although I got paid very well and left and came back for something else. I was happy to leave there. One, because of the rare one engineer in there who had a sort of human approach to this, and was understanding that I was trying to essentially tell a story from their minds to somebody else's minds, and that whatever they thought was terrific was not necessarily terrific. They had been enclosed. And the others were very difficult to deal with, but I would grit my teeth and deal with it. That was something I was sort of used to. But when this other guy came, it really kind of fell apart. So the sexism wasn't that heavy at that point. Just, they didn't consider me intelligent.
Okay.
I wasn't intelligent enough for them. So
okay.
that was the big thing, that underneath I was probably not smart enough for them. But that's the kind of thing you have to prove over and over whenever you're working in technical profession. So, but when the sexism of this one guy especially, who became very influential in the group, that kind of tipped it over for me. It's like, okay, I'm dealing with this stuff, but I can't deal with that stuff all at the same time. And I took off and they kept inviting me back. No. And the guy who headed it wanted me to write a book with him. It's like, no. Is that the kind of story you had in mind?
Let's go south a little bit, so to speak, to Silicon Valley. What is, in your mind, how has the culture changed between 1990 and 2018?
Well, one wanted to work in a startup. I actually preferred working in some kind of research capacity like that because you have to broaden your mind, or some new development that was sort of on the back burner for something. Maybe that will be a new product, maybe it won't. I guess there's a story in that for me I could tell you. But of course, now it's just startup driven, startup. The idea is everyone's supposed to be a CEO of a startup. Well, of course, that's impossible because somebody has to work for somebody. So at some point, you do need employees, and the idea the employees make money. Everyone wants to make money. But it seems that the goal, the sign of success, is that you have started a company of your own.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happened now is the vast amount of money that is getting thrown at these companies. And they, in the interim, they no longer have to go public to get their funding. Normally, well, in the bust, they'd get all this money with no prospect of getting profitable, and the how they get their money was just go IPO and have the public fund their failure. And so in this case, there's no impetus to go public because they're getting private money. So it's a private game now. The ones who are going to get very rich, the investors, are people who are already very wealthy.
Yep.
And so what I fear is that when the public gets a chance, when a company goes public, they will rush in. Oh, I can't wait to buy some of this or that. Suddenly they jump in the game, and the smart money begins selling. And again, the sort of the general public winds up holding the bag for the success or failure, mainly failure that happens in startups.
Yes.
Maybe 1 in 10. A good ratio. Venture capitalists told me that a good ratio would be 1 in 10 succeeding past the third year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that's another, like, you have to have a tolerance for failure profession.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, that, I lived in South of Market in the last part of the book I just wrote, Life in Code.
Yeah.
It was about, I had to get out of there. I couldn't stand the culture, the congestion, the walking by the WeWork facility nearby, and on the window, do what you love. It drives me crazy, as if that is something that the huge proportion of people on earth could ever do.
That's right.
It was just this horrible mantra that enraged me, and I had to just put on my blinders and keep doing this day by day. And finally I just said, well, the traffic, I was saying to my husband, we kept saying, we got to get out of here, we got to get out of here. And then walked out some terrible traffic one day, and I walked in, I said to him, we can't keep saying we got to get out of here and not get out of here. So we put our place on the market. It sold like in 10 days.
Wow.
And we moved. For the first time, I'm living north of Market. I've lived in all these neighborhoods like the Mission.
Yeah.
Finally, I'm on an old neighborhood in the city. It was such a relief. This building has, old people, younger people, the mix of ages, living in this place where everyone was between, 23 and 33, was really very difficult. Riding all their scooters, there were all these kids riding on their scooters on the sidewalk.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the scary thing is a lot of them, it's cool, do not have the balance for this. So they're, careening off the sidewalk, and, without any consideration for people who they might knock down. Someone like me gets knocked down and breaks a bone on the sidewalk. That is really a serious matter. But, I know they're young and I know they're adventuresome, but there needs to be some awareness that there are other people in the world who are not on scooters. And that's, when I was young, I was crazy, of course.
Yeah.
But I didn't live in an entire world where I didn't know there was another world outside.
Yes, that's very true. There's a lot of that here in Austin as well. There's again, it's that bubble, the whole world's a bubble, and that must be amazing. Like you say, living with intergenerational in a intergenerational neighborhood now. What a complete difference! Because now, I mean, that's what I think is the 20 and 30-year-olds in San Francisco, and I forget that there's other people there. It's been a while.
Well, finally a dream was to also lease a place in Manhattan. I grew up in Queens, and to me, even my mother knew that wasn't really New York. She'd say, well, I'm going to New York today. She would mean going to Manhattan.
Yeah.
Sit there in Queens and look across the river and go, oh, that's New York. Someday I'll live there. So finally, much later on in life, I lived there. And the one thing is that it's an intergenerational neighborhood, I think. There are old people with their strollers. There are kids running around. There are people, brown faces, white faces. The Upper East Side, when you get around Broadway, 70s and 80s, is a very mixed neighborhood. So I just felt this is where I have to be. So I think, let me go back to the video
Sure.
phase of life. I think that is what really reinforced if I had what I have of a social conscience, to the extent I have one.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there was the 60s, but that was also, you were sort of inside this social movement. But doing videos and going around to different places, people who were addicted to heroin,
Mm-hmm.
with an Indian tribe that was fighting to keep the state from running a road through their reservation. The farmers who were all around us, the dairy farmers, who were losing their family farms because of this new requirement that they install very expensive equipment, or they could not be part of the milk cooperative. The milk cooperative is what picks up all the milk and takes it to the processor.
Yes.
And so forth. And so it was working on pieces like that I saw. I wasn't in Cornell, this beautiful campus, gorges and waterfalls. I moved farther out, and I saw rural poverty, and which I knew nothing about. And I think it really made me think more broadly about who is we. We say, well, we do this, we do that. I said, well, who's we? Who is the definition of we? And I think that forced on me something to say, well, I'm in this really privileged position, and I became aware of it. And can I do anything to help? Movements, join marches, work, do phone banking, contribute money. I feel that certain responsibility to work outside the comfort zone.
Yes. And I was really struck by a recent interview you had at Google, where you said that there's more of an idea of working for the good of the company versus the good of society. That really struck me.
Well, that was someone I spoke to at one of these events. Angel investors come to. These are people with enough money to invest on their own in startups. Excuse me. I attended a lot of these, places where kids, mostly to me, very young people made pitches for their startups looking for funding. And the angel investor sessions were nice because they were small. And afterwards, of course, everyone networks now.
Yeah.
There's furious networking. I understand everyone works so alone, and everyone has to succeed, and they don't have a company in which they can advance. So the networking fills that need, I think. But I'm really terrible at it. When cocktail parties, I hug the wall.
Yeah, I can relate.
And I had to learn long ago that when people leave your talking group, it doesn't mean that they necessarily think you're boring, though they might. It's just that people are supposed to move on. I'm like, oh no, I'm clinging to this conversation to move on. So,
yeah.
Networking is really not my strong suit. But afterwards, this young man came up to me, and young, he must have been maybe 25. And I asked him, he described his startup, and it was some software to evaluate resumes to see who would be the best fit for the best social and organizational fit for the company.
Okay.
And I just said to him, well, that's just another way to perpetuate discrimination and sameness.
Mm-hmm.
You're just recreating the society that's inside this culture. And he just, without missing a beat, he said to me, I'm not working for society, I'm working for the company. And to me, that, he said this without any sense that might be something you might want to keep to yourself.
Wow.
I was just astounded by that. So I didn't know what else to say. I just had to stop talking there.
Yeah. it's the freeze moment, you know. It's like, did I just hear that?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and I think about, you know, when I keep going back to, like, you know, the good old days and all that. I mean, there's a commonality of, you know, we've got John here, and a lot of the people on the well. There's just a sort of a, you know, again, with that diversity of interface with all kinds of different people and ways of thinking, and there's just so much of that is, I see with the young people I work, that just seems to be completely lacking, and which leads me to think about, you know, another issue that's important to you and important to me and important to, I know, John and Scoop too, is the ageism, and what a crucial and powerful resource we're missing with not having, you know, let's call us the elders, I guess.
No, I want to just interject, say one thing. We're talking very broad generalizations here, because I do know people who are working in startups, nephews and nephews and nieces who are really socially conscious and who look for people like themselves to work with. So I just want to make a big point here that there is an overwhelming ethos, but individuals within it can be extraordinarily remarkable people.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
Could I step in and make a comment?
Sure.
I find ageism in myself. I find that when I show up for like one of the old rock bands or something like that, and there's a bunch of gray hairs in the audience, that I kind of react to that. I feel, and I realize that I'm not really around older people very often. And the younger people I'm around seem to be pretty accepting of me. And, you know, I'm certainly a graybeard.
Yeah, but you're extraordinary, John.
Well, I think that, thank you. Well, I think that, but I do think that it can work more than one way. And I really do think that there's something about difference and shifts and so forth that creates some discomfort, and that discomfort is best reduced by, you know, sort of getting out and getting exposed to all these different realities. And those of us who have spent so much time on the internet, you know, and in communities like the Well, where people actually do have conversations with each other that are not like drive-by conversations, but that really work as conversations, and people get history together, that you come to know a diversity of people, and that in itself is helpful in resolving the potential biases that we might have, you know. But the internet mitigates against that in some contexts, because in some contexts it creates support for like the filter bubbles, and for, you know, for people to go off into their own silos and hear only the people that they agree with.
Yeah, it's funny. The word silo was originally came from software, by the way.
Tell us about that, Ellen. I didn't know that.
Well, this goes back to 80s, I guess. A company, wish I could remember the guy's name, a very bright guy. I think he had a product called Constellation. And one of the things that was the problem is that people had these different pieces of software. Now we take it for granted. You know, you had this word processing, you had this spreadsheet, you had this database, and how these pieces were not coordinated. And it's like the software from Smalltalk. In other words, he talked about breaking down these tasks into smaller chunks that could interact with each other. And there was another whole set of software that later blossomed from that kind of concept. But the thought was that the processes and the data were in silos, and that's where I first heard that term related to computers. So
Got it.
I want to go back to what John said. I feel, despite my my having had it with the startup culture, and I think that, you know, you have to be fair. I lived in South of Market for 22 years, and I saw it go through the first boom, which was, I loved bunch of, crazies, psychopathic people. And I'm saying this very broadly. People guys with long gray ponytails, cypherpunks. It was a mix of people. And I remember about going to computer freedom and privacy conferences where, there would be the FBI and the NSA, and there would be a cypherpunk, right? So that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
And then that fell apart for reasons that made complete sense. Again, companies with no prospect of making money, their stock evaluations going crazy, and there are technical reasons in the stock market why things that get asymptotic, that is, they start climbing like a rocket ship, will have to come down. So, lived through that. Some of the restaurants closed, neighborhood changed, it became quiet at night. And then, of course, we came into this new phase. So, I've seen a lot in my time. Despite my feeling that I had to get out of there, I do feel a certain responsibility to get engaged with younger people who are involved in it. When I was at Google, I don't know if the Q&A made it into the video, but this one woman asked me, I just said to her, I need younger women to step up and do this. I'm sick of talking about this. I have to go think about something else. But and there are younger women. Claire Evans has a book out now called Broadband. Norbert Wiener, who writes for The Atlantic and other places, has got a book in the works. I'm really looking forward to these younger women getting involved, and I do feel some sense of when they reach out to me that I want to reach back, because we need their voices, their interests, their voices. And so this woman in the audience, I said, look, I've had it, I've just had it with this. And she said, well, you have a certain responsibility. And I went, oh, yeah. Is that true? I do feel a sense of responsibility. That's why I'm talking to you and, making a couple of appearances here and there where I don't have to write a speech.
Yes.
But at some point that really has to stop. New voices have to come in, and I have to learn from them. People need to know history. I feel one of the sad things is that we don't know how we got into this place with Twitter. We don't know how this moment where we have our president has disregard for experts. Go back to when the web was coming on, 1998. This was all those commercials, all these middlemen, this travel agents, the stockbroker, anyone who helped you in a sale, people in stores, they're on commission, anyone who might help you who has expertise, even a lawyer. Don't trust them. Go to LegalZoom. These are situations in which you're on your own, and so it's the web you come to. You're at sort of the mercy of the web, and so all that expertise, some of it, some of it, people were out to get you, some weren't. Unlike now, right?
Yes.
Immediately, the mainstream media, that was the first wiping off of the mainstream media. So this was around the reporting for the Iraq War, which, so the mainstream media at that point did not do a good job of questioning this. So at that point, all of this movement started, like, don't trust any of these people. They're not experts. You don't need curators at museums. You don't need curators at conversations. These people, don't know any more than you do. Just come to my website, where, by the way, your knowledge of the world will get narrower because you're at the mercy of their software.
Precisely.
So
it was interesting. We gave voice to the people who were on the fringes, but we didn't realize they were going to take over the world.
Could you explain that?
Well, these kind of weird conspiracy theorist types, the InfoWars people, people who have total distrust for established media sources, but complete trust in gonzo, like kind of weird media sources, thinking about InfoWars again, Drudge Report, things like that. Um, um, they, you just didn't hear from them before we had the internet. And now that we have the internet, they are visible and audible. We can see them and hear from them, and they can find each other, and they are taking power, and they're getting themselves elected. And we've gone so far as to elect one of those people president.
Well, I think one of the things that these groups do in removing expertise as anything to be valued is that you don't have to worry that someone may be smarter than you. I have a very, very good brain, says the president.
Mm-hmm.
And so everyone is on the same level now. Nobody's really smarter than I am. I can get these conversations and I can say, well, blah, blah, blah. And someone else says blah, blah, blah. And no one has an authoritative voice. So that's a great comfort to people. You understand the appeal that it has for someone to say, well, you're just, we're all the same.
Yep.
And no, I do understand the relaxation and the pleasure that one can have in not having to strive for knowledge. Because achieving knowledge is hard. It's hard work. And unless you instill in people from early on that hard work is worth it, if you want to wail on a saxophone in a jazz riff, you have to work hard to learn that, play that well. And if you really want to play that well, you got to go through the hard stuff, right? So I feel that that whole notion that you have to work, that it takes both passion, you really want to do it, you have to have the passion, otherwise you wouldn't put up with all that hard stuff. But that's of value. And it's much easier to tell somebody, just stay home on your sofa and say what you want, and you're as smart as anyone.
Yes. I think that, I think a lot about our educational system, and I have a 21-year-old daughter, and she had a pretty eclectic educational upbringing, but a lot of it was focused on self-directed learning. I tried to give her opportunities to be able to follow a passion all the way through, and there was no admonishment for not keeping interest in something, because she would always follow something through. She'd just say, okay, I've had my time learning the violin. Now I'm going to move on to this over here. And
Maggie, forgive me for interrupting you.
No, please do.
I feel I'm not a fan of that approach.
Okay, why so?
Because if you want to play the violin, in some way you have to study in some regard with someone who really can play the violin. And you need the guidance, and you need someone to say, no, that note was wrong. No, you have that passage wrong. No, this is faster, this is slower. To really kind of educate you in a deeper sense. That you've learned it, I don't know, off the internet, but that doesn't mean you can play the violin. Right?
Oh, yes. I definitely...
There is an expert teacher. There is a mentor. There is someone who has a lot to teach you. And there's more to go, right? Unless you just want to, play it. I know I'll never play it again. To me, that makes no sense. But, I'm not criticizing your daughter, but I think that's part of what's inherent in self-directed learning. Because if you're just by yourself, you'll say, okay, I got that. But if you've got someone up there who really knows music and really can push you, you have to get pushed, right?
I definitely agree with that. And I just wanted to qualify that a little bit. When she'd be interested in something, she would work with a teacher directly. It was being able to, as opposed to, she had some regular curriculum as well. Don't get me wrong on that.
Oh, no, I'm sure.
Yeah, but it would be, being able to just really, with our system now, there's not a lot of time to, everything's so programmed, excuse the pun, programmed for, you've got your school and then you've got your soccer practice and all that, that it in my experience with some of the kids that I've met, there's not a lot of chance to just, say you're passionate about writing a program, right? There, unless you're in that realm, through school or whatever, there's just not a lot of time. So I'm just really.
I'm a big fan of going up on a hill with grass and just rolling down.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
To me, this is how you think of new things.
Yeah.
I mean, unstructured time is really as important as structured. I guess we're going very far afield now. We're not talking about technology anymore. Because I could go on and on about this.
Well, I'd love to ask you a question about, we've been talking about then versus now and all that. How is the coding world now as opposed to when you first started out? I've read some of your stories in Close to the Machine. I love both that and Life and Code. It's really great, especially when you were talking about the changes in South of Market. But I would love a story or two about then and now.
Okay, I will just talk about certain trends that really trouble me.
Okay, great.
I can come back to the easy answer in that, which is
okay.
The divide between the front end and the back end, women stuck in the front end. The technical profession is considered the back end. That's the server side, and that's really a bifurcation that's very sad, because a lot of people want to go into programming, and the easiest route is into front end, Python, languages that are relatively easy to learn, and get stuck there because there isn't a clear path from the front to the back end. Okay, that's a short answer. The longer answer is artificial intelligence, especially machine learning. To me, this is a frightening trend. I mean, wonderful things are done, especially in medicine, but there is bias in there that we cannot see. I've asked a couple of computer scientists who do machine learning, can you see the intermediate decisions? Well, they can't, because it goes by, nanosecond speed. So you really can't see the decision-making process. You don't know if there was a bias in this or a data bias in this particular decision. And so essentially, we give up human agency when we do this. And it's hard to criticize an outcome. There was even a woman, I have an article somewhere on my computer where she loves the software that really helps her diagnose the cancer she's working. It's been, just amazing help to her. But then she wondered, she sort of learned that they were testing this one medical procedure, drug, that it had the outcome in one cancer, but it couldn't tell her, well, would it work in this one as well? And so she had this thing that might be really efficacious in a wider sense, but they were stuck into this machine learning path that took them to one outcome. So you judge the software by the outcome. So, and then they did a test, and it turns out it was efficacious on another type of cancer. So this is just the kind of thing. I mean, I think the machine learning in the medical profession is really giving us astounding new treatments and new approaches. In the social era, a social part, it's frightening. Heard a presentation by a woman who does machine learning, and it was about finding a way for an organization to be most efficient. So, first of all, the notion of efficient is can have extreme prejudices within that, what you mean by efficient. You just want to say the most output. Well, is that the best output? It can ask those questions. And I asked her, can you see the intermediate steps? And she said, not at this time. Now, maybe there will be technology in the future that can see those steps, but will there be a human being who can really evaluate that? And I wonder that we don't see the mistakes in machine learning. For instance, those fortunate mistakes, the things that are mistakes that you go like, aha, that wrong thing is sort of interesting. Post-it notes came from
Yeah.
a failed adhesive. So
Yes.
there are other examples that don't come to mind right away. So fortunate failure, failure that stimulates, why did it fail? Oh, I see. So that's also encapsulated in software that runs without a lot of human agency involved. So this is the new direction in this is coding, but I mean in computer science in general, that gives me the most pause. I think that needs to be talked about the most when we talk about technology, as a subject.
That would be a great kind of roundtable thing to have. John, can we make that happen? That's fascinating.
I'm hoping to do something like that. I was invited to speak at Women in Technology Conference. It's a smallish group at Berkeley.
Yes.
They do artificial intelligence. That's a broader subject. It is going to be a sort of fireside chat arrangement, and that's kind of what I'm hoping to get started with and ask them these questions, because they're the experts in it, and I'd be really interested to see what they say. So I'm hoping it will wind up being an interesting discussion for them and me.
Absolutely. I want to keep on top of that one. I'd love to fly on the wall after the fact. That would be fascinating.
I'm sure they'll video it and stream it.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah.
What do you see? Between I loved how you used the term fortunate failure. I'm going to be thinking about that a lot. What do you think? What do you think is going to be the outcome of this? I just want to go back for a minute to the mistrust of curation and experts and all that. What do you think is the trajectory? What do you think is going to be the outcome of all this in the next few years?
Oh boy.
Thoughts on that?
I only wound up to be a good prognostician about, in 1998 about what was happening, expertise. That turned out to be true. But in general, my editor, Sean McDonald, said, really, I don't think that's, we don't really want you to sit around talking about the future. When people ask me, what's the future going to be like? I say, it's what you make it. So I can't say. I feel it has to be influenced by people like you who ask questions and who want to promulgate deeper thinking. And so that I have, that's all I can say. The future is what we make it. Now the question is, are these trends that are happening now so powerful that we will have to live with it for, another generation? And this is what scares me. I feel like we're living the late 30s all over again, but it probably won't happen that way. It happens differently. The fall of the Western ideal, Hungary, Poland, this country, it's called, it's not populism, it's nativism. And that is, such a widespread phenomenon right now. So, as a Jewish person, in one of these white nationalists demonstrations, there was a sign that was, Jew media goes down. So, once you start mistrusting others, those others, one gets drawn in, who is self and who is other becomes a scarier and scarier question. So,
absolutely.
So, to the extent that technology, places like Twitter, are powerfully enabling technologies to reach over the head of any intervention. Okay, no matter what Trump's aides tell him and advisors tell him, he gets on a tweet and says whatever he wants, exactly opposite, and then says a couple of days later, I didn't mean it, or whatever.
Yes.
Twitter is an amazingly enabling technology for authoritarianism.
Absolutely.
And so to that extent, software and software systems have had extraordinarily powerful influence. On the one hand, we all had that dream, John, we all did this. it would create a more democratic ideal. People would talk to each other. Our ideal of the well, okay? And it still exists. I will always be ullman@well.com. Anyone wants to find me, of course, I will have to go through my mail pretty carefully, but I will always be there. And because that's sort of a home base, even though it's not the well we knew, John. But, that was, of course, everyone's dream. And Tim Berners-Lee, one by one, all the people who had hopes for it, have gone down into almost despair.
Yeah.
So, watch what you ask for. I mean, you want everyone involved, and then not everyone is a nice person.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, we didn't kind of think about that, and that the notion of respect for different viewpoints. Now, look, I mean, all the discussions on the well got pretty heated, but there was someone who stepped in, a curator, who would say, "Okay, got to back off now."
Yes.
So,
they originally called that host a fair witness.
Fair witness?
The original thing, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't. Thank you. That is a wonderful term. Can you pass that around more? Fair witness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that is right. It's not someone in charge. It's someone trying to be fair, as you witness this discussion. That's a great term. Shall it survive forever?
Yeah.
So to the extent that did not continue, it worked in a small environment. I think, the well was never big. It was
Yes.
big, it was bigger than individuals or, places, but it wasn't a mass phenomenon. And I think once you get into a mass phenomenon, all bets are off.
So I like how you put that, because it seems to me, I was going to ask you if you had some thoughts about possible bright spots, or, where you're seeing glimmers of something interesting that's more positive, given how in despair we are. I mean, a lot of the people I work with are working on focusing on bringing community more local again, instead of this, I think of how like the well got lost in the bigger whole of the World Wide Web, and seeing that getting it scaled back and local, and connecting up the local thriving little mini community networks, neighborhood by neighborhood or something, is something that I'm noticing that's kind of interesting. So if you had any thoughts in that direction.
Oh yeah, my glimmer of hope is people who call themselves now the resistance.
Excellent.
No, this is very organized. It's getting off the internet. She hates that the software tools suck. Okay, that's one thing. Improving tools, and if you're going to phone bank, you ought to know if this person is dead, right? Or if they hate you. So why waste time? But they have formed things called sister districts, where if your own community in here in San Francisco, it's hardly worthwhile to go around door to door here, right? But it is really worthwhile if you call in Virginia. And the effects were fantastic. The idea that you help out other districts that need help.
Nice.
And it traveled to other districts. Okay, get off the internet, get on a bus, get in the car, take a plane if you can afford to get there. Actually here, driving to places like Fresno and nearby that, have more Latinos there and, may not be registered to vote. Going to events where younger people are there and they stand out there with the table and get them to sign up to vote.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to me, getting off the internet, getting in the streets, getting as close you can to other people who are working on this, not sitting on your computer, going into a room. I mean, they used to do phone banking, on your own, you have a sheet, but now they find it's much more effective if people get in a room, 50 people in a room, and various people have donated space for them, so they don't have to pay for it. You have your cell phone, of course, they don't have to pay for the telephone anymore. And it gives people kind of this thing, they raise their hand, yay, they have this sort of sense of keeping a spirit of high hopes. And this is my glimmer.
Yeah. That's wonderful, and that's encouraging. And I just noticed that there's something about the connection we feel when we're face to face with one another, and being able to see facial expressions and gestures, and it adds nuance and meaning that you don't get with a screen. And also there's encouragement to be more present with people, not whip out your phone or mess with your computer or whatever. So yeah, I appreciate that. And I know we have
support. You don't need to interact one to one with people.
Yeah.
Group action, okay? Group action on a small local scale is what will save us. And I mean, as I say, get outside.
Yes.
Use software as a tool. Use your phone. Use some computers that can give you a good call list or a good place to go and knock on doors, a good district to work in. But beyond that, you've got to knock on a door. You've got to talk to a person.
Yep.
And it's hard to do. Have you ever done this? It's really hard to do.
It is.
It's really scary. It's scary. Yeah. I don't go where there are barking dogs. I'm afraid of barking dogs. I mean, I like dogs, but when they're defending their territory, it's a different kind of. I won't go where there's barking dogs or, certain signs, on the grass that tell you.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But some people, a lot of people just slam the door in your face or won't answer or say back terrible things. And then, if you get to that, let's say that 1 in 10, that venture capitalist measurement of the 1 in 10, that's
there you go.
You're good, right?
Yep.
So I think there's a tremendous sense of individual happiness and a group that spurs you on. So my glimmer is get off the internet.
That's beautiful. And I know we have to wind it up here.
Okay.
I'd like to throw it open for a, wide open platform. Any final thoughts you'd like to share? Anything that's on your mind that you'd like to gift us with?
Well, I know mostly I want to thank you too. For helping keep memories of what's happening, because I think people think things are new. They're recent, but they're not new. They're recent developments based on older things. And I think it's important to keep the history of this, how it came about. This is the trend that produced this. This is how it started. Maybe that's a clue to how to keep it going or how to end it. So the idea that there is a history here, computing is not new. You go back to ENIAC in 1945, well, computers were an object of war. So was the internet. Then war, nuclear war. But to just see what has happened over time and where the missteps were and where the good steps were, that's a history. If you go back to the 70s, you have to see that here in 2018, things are not exactly as new as you think they're.
That's great, and I really appreciate it. And I just wanted to share one final thing with you that at the school my daughter was attending, that she graduated high school from, I taught a course there that I just sort of randomly made up called A History of Digital Culture, and I based a big portion of it on Fred Turner's book From Counterculture to Cyberculture.
Yes.
And we went way back to an old James Burke episode of Connections to show the Jacquard loom and programming, and then we worked our way up. And I had John come and speak, which was great. Told everybody, all the kids, about the well, and they really loved the class. They soaked it all up. They had no idea. And it just, I know it just enthused them at the end of the course to just get a more robust, multidimensional image of, how did we get here? So I thank you too for talking with us today. And I'm gonna read your fiction. I love both your the Life in Code and Close to the Machine, and I just really appreciate your writing style and your what you have to talk about. So, and thanks for letting me do my little interview with you here.
Well, it's been my pleasure.
Ellen Ullman's books are available online or at many bookstores. You may follow Ellen on Twitter as @EllenU. With Maggie Duval and John Lebkowski, I'm Scoop Sweeney. This is the Plutopia News Network, 20 minutes into the future.